I stayed behind after Magnificence, thinking it would just be every other quiet moment. What my trainer did next completely modified everything I knew approximately limitations. The clock ticked loudly inside the empty lecture room, every sound echoing like the beating of a restless coronary heart. I sat at my table, doodling senseless within the corner of my pocketbook. School had ended 20 minutes in the past, but here I used to be waiting because Ms. Harper had asked me to live at the back of. I wasn't certain why. It wasn't like I might executed something incorrect, or at least nothing that I thought she'd observed. Ms. Harper had usually been exceptional. She became unlike the opposite instructors at our small city excessive faculty. Her presence became commanding but heat, and she had this manner of looking at you have been the maximum essential person within the room. It turned into a little intoxicating, even for a 17-year vintage like me, who, till then, hadn't paid plenty attention to the complexities of adult relationships. But Miss Harper wasn't just any grown-up. She had this spark, this attraction that made her the problem of whispered jokes and secret glances among the men in Magnificence. However, now, sitting by myself on this silent room, the jokes did not feel so humorous. The air turned into heavy, thick with something I couldn't quite place. I heard her heels earlier than I saw her. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound turned into planned, measured. She entered the room, her figure silhouetted in opposition to the dim light from the hallway. Her presence crammed the gap like an electric rate. "Arouse," she said, her voice clean, almost too clean. "Thanks for ready, no hassle," I replied, moving in my seat. My voice cracked barely, betraying the anxiousness I hadn't found out become creeping in. She walked over to her table, her actions fluid and confident, and positioned a stack of papers down with a soft thud. Then she grew to become to me, her hazel eyes locking onto mine. "You've been distracted currently," she stated. "Leaning against her desk is everything." "Okay." The question caught me off defend, distracted, certain. I daydream occasionally, who didn't? However, the way she stated it, like she'd been taking note of me. In particular, it became unsettling and flattering abruptly. "I'm nice," I stated, shrugging. "Simply college, you understand. Tests arising, plenty of strain." She nodded her gaze, not wavering. "You're a clever kid. Arav, you have got capacity, but I feel like you are retaining back, like there's something you're not announcing." I felt my throat tighten. What became she getting at? Did she recognize something? My thoughts raced, seeking to piece collectively any moments from the past week, hell, the beyond month, that could explain this sudden attention. No. I stammered, "Everything's exceptional." "Absolutely." She tilted her head, analyzing me like she could see instantly through my phrases. The silence stretched on, and simply once I couldn't take it anymore. She smiled, a tender, nearly conspiratorial smile. "All proper," she stated, pushing off the table. "However, if there ever is something you could inform me that proper." I nodded, unsure of what else to mention. The instant should have felt comforting, but alternatively it felt charged. "Suitable," she said, walking over to the whiteboard and erasing the remnants of the day's lesson, due to the fact now and again it allows to have a person to speak to someone who receives it. I watched her, the curve of her lower back as she reached for the better elements of the board, the way her hair fell over her shoulder. My heart changed into pounding, even though I didn't recognize why this become only an ordinary conversation. Wasn't it? However, then something shifted. "Arav," she stated, turning to face me. Her expression become extraordinary, now extreme, almost pleading. "Can I ask you for prefer?" "A prefer," I echoed, harassed. "You, certain. What is it?" She walked in the direction of me, her heels clicking softly at the tile ground, and stopped only a few toes away. Her hands had been clasped in the front of her, and for the first time she seemed uncertain of herself. Need your help with something? She stated, her voice decrease. Now it's complex. However, I need to understand that I'm able to consider you. Trust my mind becomes spinning. What could a teacher in all likelihood want from me? A high college senior with no power, no affect. And why did she sound so determined? Okay, I said cautiously. What do you want? She hesitated, biting her lip, a gesture I might visible a million times before, but by no means like this. It turned into the form of hesitation that made my belly twist, made the air within the room sense heavier than it already became. It is no longer something I'm able to speak about here, she said. Ultimately, her words deliberate. Now, not like this. Might you meet me after school, day after today, someplace private? Private alarm bells have been going off in my head. Now, this was incorrect. Something this became, it wasn't ordinary. But on the same time, there has been a part of me, a part I wasn't proud of. That became intrigued, curious, flattered. Even why me, I requested, seeking to sound casual. Her eyes softened and she took a small step closer. Because I suppose you will recognize, she said. And due to the fact I don't have absolutely everyone else. The burden of these phrases hit me like a truck. She didn't have everybody else. It turned into a prone admission, one that made her appear much less just like the assured, untouchable trainer I'd constantly regarded, and greater like a person, someone who, for a few motive, wished me iwager. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, wherein a flicker of comfort crossed her face, and he or she smiled again. This time it was proper, nearly radiant. Thank you, she said softly. I will text you the details, simply do not tell anyone. Okay, I nodded, though my thoughts become still racing. What had I simply agreed to? And why did it feel like I would just crossed a line I did not even recognize turned into there? As she walked me to the door, her hand brushed towards mine, a fleeting contact, however, one that sent a jolt via my complete body. I glanced at her, but she did not say whatever, did not even have a look at me. It was as though it hadn't passed off at all, however it had, and that I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole manner home. That night time, as I lay in mattress gazing the ceiling, her words replayed in my head. I want to know that I will agree with you. What did she mean by that? What becomes so important that she could not speak about it at faculty? And why did she pick out me? Sleep failed to come without difficulty. When it ultimately did, it changed into packed with restless dreams, desires of Ms. Harper, of her pleading eyes, of that fleeting contact that felt like a spark. However, the tale does not end there, no longer even near, due to the fact day after today when I met her, the whole lot modified. The following day dragged on longer than I notioned feasible. Every class felt like an eternity, each tick of the clock louder than the closing. My stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and unease. What had I gotten myself into? Sooner or later, the ultimate bell rang. I lingered in the hallway trying to act informal, even though I ought to sense the weight of my classmates' chatter and laughter around me. No one knew, no one could recognize. I checked my cell phone for the textual content she'd sent earlier. Meet me in the antique art room. 4 p.m., don't be overdue. The artwork room was in the back of the school, a space that hadn't been utilized in years due to the fact a more recent wing became built. It changed into the precise vicinity for a non-public communication or for something plenty more questionable. After I got there, the door turned into barely ajar. I knocked softly, however the sound slightly echoed in the empty hallway, pushing it open. I stepped inside. Miss Harper become already there, status by using the window together with her back to me. The sunlight streaming through the glass lit up her silhouette, outlining her in a manner that made my breath catch. She grew to become whilst she heard the door near, and for a second she just looked at me. You came, she stated softly, as though she hadn't been positive I would. Yeah, I spoke back, shifting nervously. You said it changed into critical. It is. She crossed the room, her heels clicking on the worn tile ground. She stopped only some feet away, close enough that I ought to smell her fragrance, a soft floral fragrance that made my head spin. I want you to pay attention, she commenced, her voice constant however low. What I'm about to inform you, it stays among us. No one else can realize. Do you apprehend? I nodded even though my heart was pounding. Okay. She hesitated as if looking for the proper words. There are matters going on in my existence proper now, things I cannot talk about with absolutely everyone else. I notion I should deal with it by myself, however I can't. Her voice broke barely on the ultimate word, and he or she regarded away, her composure cracking, for just a moment. Miss Harper, I said, stepping nearer without even figuring out it. You can inform me, I mean, in case you consider me, I will do anything I can to help. She looked back at me then, her eyes glassy but severe. I do not know why I consider you. Arav, I sense like I will, and that scares me. Her words hung in the air, heavy and electric-powered. I desired to mention something to reassure her. However, earlier than I ought to, she reached out and placed a hand on my arm. The warm temperature of her contact dispatched a jolt via me, and whilst our eyes met, there was something there, something unspoken, however plain. Miss Harper, I commenced, but my voice trailed off as she stepped nearer, her hand nevertheless on my arm. Call me Sarah, she said softly, her voice slightly above a whisper. Sarah. I repeated the name, feeling peculiar and forbidden on my tongue. Before I could think or manner what turned into happening, she leaned in. It became gradual, almost hesitant. However, whilst her lips brushed mine, the arena appeared to forestall. My thoughts screamed at me to turn away. This become incorrect. This become risky, but my body betrayed me. I kissed her lower back, the heat of the moment, eating every rational thought. The kiss did not last long, but whilst she pulled away, her cheeks were flushed and her respiratory become unsteady. I shouldn't have performed that. She murmured more to herself than to me. I didn't realize what to mention. My heart changed into racing my mind, a blur of feelings, exhilaration, guilt, confusion. It is Kay. I managed to stammer, though I wasn't sure I thought it myself. She shook her head, stepping again and wrapping her arms round herself. No, it is no longer. This is complex. I failed to mean for this to occur. Then why did you? I requested, the phrases spilling out. Before I ought to stop them, her eyes darted to mine, and for a second I saw something raw and vulnerable, because I am lonely. She admitted, her voice slightly audible. Due to the fact I have made errors, and I don't know a way to fix them. And because you make me sense something I have never felt in a long term. Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about me. It became approximately her struggles, her ache. And yet I couldn't deny that a part of me became drawn to her, to the forbidden nature of what become happening. I don't know what to mention. I admitted, my voice trembling. You don't have to mention whatever. She responded, her tone softer. Now Justin, need you to be here for me. Can you try this? I nodded, even though I wasn't positive what that meant or what I used to be agreeing to. Yeah, I can try this. She smiled, then a small, fragile smile that made my chest tighten. Thank you, she stated. But the second didn't last. A surprising noise in the hallway, a far-off door slamming, made us both sore. The anxiety inside the room shattered, and she or he straightened, smoothing her skirt as if nothing had came about. You need to go, she said quickly, her tone unexpectedly brisk and professional. We will communicate more the following day. I desired to protest, to invite what was taking place, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She was scared, frightened of being stuck, scared of what this can mean. So I nodded and left my thoughts spinning with questions and emotions I couldn't untangle. The next day, she changed into distinctive in magnificence. She acted like not anything had came about, just like the kiss within the artwork room become only a figment of my imagination. However, her eyes informed a different tale. On every occasion our gazes met, there was a flicker of something guilt, longing, fear. I stayed after class again, though this time she didn't inquire from me too. I simply could not leave. "You are nonetheless right here," she said, whilst she observed me lingering via the door. I desired to speak, I said, stepping inside and ultimate the door at the back of me. She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Arav, I do not assume this is a great idea. Why no longer?" I challenged, my voice less assailable than I expected. "You stated you needed me. You stated you trusted me." Her shoulders sagged, and for a second she looked absolutely defeated. "I do not know what I'm doing," she admitted. "I should not have concerned you on this. However, you did," I stated. "Transferring nearer, and I'm right here now. So simply tell me what you want." She appeared up at me, then her eyes full of an emotion. I couldn't, pretty region, and before I may want to system what turned into going on, she closed the gap between us, her arms gripping the front of my shirt as she pulled me into another kiss. This one became distinctive, more extreme, more desperate. It was like she became looking to drown out the whole thing else, to lose herself inside the second. And for some time I let her. I let myself. However, whilst she pulled away, her expression changed into conflicted. "This has to forestall," she stated, even though her tone lacked conviction. "Does it?" I requested, my voice barely above a whisper. She failed to solution, and the silence between us changed into deafening. The tension among us simplest grew stronger after that tood kiss. Every passing day have become an unbearable mix of stolen glances, unstated words, and moments that felt far too charged to be whatever but dangerous. I knew this turned into incorrect. We each did. However, the weight of that information appeared to gas. Something became building between us rather than prevent. Ting it. It turned into like trying to hold returned a typhoon. It become not possible. The following few days felt like a fever dream. Ms. Harper Sarah had started to find excuses to preserve me at the back of After Elegance. Out-of-place paper, an indistinct question about my assignments, whatever to have me live. It changed into diffused enough not to arouse suspicion from others. However, among the two folks, the indicators had been clear. Each interaction turned into laced with a hunger that neither of us should forget about any extra. Then came the instant that modified the whole lot. It became past due Friday afternoon, the college nearly deserted. Sarah had asked me to live after class once more, this time beneath the pretense of supporting her arrange the deliver closet. I knew it was an excuse she knew that I knew, and yet I stayed. The deliver closet turned into a small, cramped space at the back of her classroom, filled with dusty textbooks, antique posters, and forgotten artwork materials. She led the way, her actions practical, however, her respiratory choppy. I should listen it even inside the quiet. It became like the air among us had thickened, becoming almost suffocating. "Can you hand me that container?" she asked, pointing to a stack of substances on an excessive shelf. I reached up my frame, brushing against hers as I did. The contact turned into harmless, unintentional. However, it sent a shockwave through each of us. I iced up the box in my arms and looked down at her. She turned into watching me. Her cheeks flushed, her lips barely parted. "Arav," she whispered, her voice trembling earlier than I should prevent myself. I leaned inside the box, fell to the ground with a thud. However, neither of us observed my lips, discovered hers, and this time there was no hesitation, no conserving back. The kiss became fiery, desperate, as if we have been each seeking to devour each different. Her fingers gripped my shirt, pulling me nearer, and I wrapped my hands round her, feeling the warm temperature of her frame in opposition to mine. "Sarah," I murmured between kisses, the name nevertheless feeling forbidden and exhilarating on my tongue. She pulled back simply enough to look at me, her eyes dark with preference. I shouldn't. However, whilst she stated the phrases, she turned into pulling me closer, her hands tangling in my hair. It was like we might crossed a line we should in no way uncross, and neither people cared anymore. The hunger become too strong, too overwhelming. Her lips located mine once more urgent. This time, the tiny area of the supply closet appeared to reduce even more as we gave in to the pull among us. Each contact, every kiss felt electric, like we had been both on fire and could not put it out. "Arouse," she gasped, her fingers moving to my shoulders. "We need to forestall," but I didn't let her finish. I kissed her once more, my coronary heart pounding so loudly I used to be positive she could hear it, and to my surprise she failed to resist. She melted into me, her body urgent in opposition to mine, as though she could not get close sufficient. Time appeared to blur. I did not recognize how lengthy we stayed like that, tangled in each other in that tiny, dimly lit space. All I knew became that I didn't want it to end, but in the end it did. She pulled away abruptly, her respiration ragged, her cheeks flushed. "This is insane," she stated, walking a hand through her hair. "We cannot. We should not. Then why can we hold doing it?" I requested, my voice soft but firm. She checked out me, her eyes packed with a combination of guilt and longing. "Because I can't assist myself," she admitted. "Make me sense alive in a way I haven't felt in years." Her words hit me like a freight teach. There has been so much vulnerability in them, so much raw emotion, but they handiest made me need her more. "Sarah," I stated, stepping nearer. "I don't want to stop, I cannot." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the door as if a person may walk in. But the college became empty. It changed into just us by myself in this second that felt each terrifying and exhilarating. "I do not know how to do that," she stated, subsequently her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know the way to need. You want this and nonetheless be me." "Then don't," I said, my words sudden even myself. "Simply be right here with me right now." For a moment I notioned she would possibly shrink back, might end this earlier than it spiraled even further out of manipulate. But as a substitute, she closed the space between us again, her lips finding mine with even extra depth than earlier. The starvation among us was insatiable, now a wildfire that couldn't be contained. Each kiss, every touch felt love. It became pushing us further down, a course we could not go back from, and neither people desired to. Over the next week our mystery grew heavier, but so did our want for each other. We began finding ways to thieve moments on my own, no matter how unstable a lingering touch in the hallway, a hurried kiss behind a closed door. It changed into reckless and dangerous, but we had been both too a ways gone to prevent. One evening, after each person had left for the day, she texted me, "Meet me within the body of Workers' Lounge. It's unlocked." My coronary heart raced as I made my manner there, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The staff living room became dimly lit, the blinds drawn. She became looking forward to me sitting on the threshold of a desk, her arms crossed, said as though seeking to preserve herself collectively. When she noticed me, her expression softened. "I should not have requested you to come," she said, though she did not sound satisfied. "However you did," I responded, remaining the door in the back of me, "and I am right here." She stood, her actions hesitant. However, after I reached for her, she failed to turn away. Our lips met once more, and this time it turned into one of a kind. There was, nevertheless, the identical starvation, the equal determined want. But there was also something deeper, something that felt nearly like a plea. "Arav," she whispered towards my lips, her arms clutching my shirt. This can't ultimate then. "Permits no longer consider that right now," I stated, pulling her nearer. We misplaced ourselves in each other again, the sector out of doors fading into nothingness. For the once stolen moments, not anything else mattered. Now not the rules, no longer the results, simply us. Due to the fact, as a whole lot as we tried to deny it, the partitions have been lashed in, and the hunger that brought us collectively might soon be the very aspect that tore us aside. The days that observed felt like taking walks a tightrope above an countless abyss. Every glance, every stolen moment carried the weight of what we had achieved and what we continued to do. The hunger among us had grown into something insatiable, a force we couldn't manage, no matter how a great deal we attempted to convince ourselves in any other case. But the more we fed that starvation, the nearer we got here to catastrophe. It became a Thursday afternoon past due sufficient that most of the college had emptied out. The autumn sky out of doors become painted in colorings of orange and pink, but the beauty of the scene was lost on me. As I stood by using Sarah's study room door waiting, she texted me in advance. "Come after the closing bell. We need to speak." The words sent a chill through me. We might been on the threshold for weeks now, and I ought to experience something transferring, something risky. I stepped in her, closing the door at the back of me. Sarah was sitting at her desk, her head in her arms. She seemed up while she heard me, her eyes heavy with something. I could not quite place, guilt, worry, and something that gave the look of resignation. "You got here," she stated softly, status as I walked closer. "Of course," I responded, even though my voice became laced with unease what is taking place. She hesitated, her arms clutching the brink of the desk. "Arav, we need to forestall," she said, her phrases cutting via the air like a blade prevent. I echoed, my stomach losing. "What are you speaking about this?" she said, motioning among us. "Something this is. It has to cease." Her phrases felt like a punch to the intestine. I stepped nearer, my voice growing in spite of myself. "You do not imply that I do," she insisted, even though her trembling voice betrayed her. This isn't proper. It in no way become." "Then why did you let it happen?" I demanded, my frustration effervescent over. "Why did you maintain pulling me in? If you knew it became incorrect." Her expression crumpled, and for a moment I thought she would possibly cry. "Because I'm vulnerable," she admitted, "due to the fact I'm selfish, but I cannot do this anymore. Arav, we are going to get caught, and if that happens," her voice trailed off. But the fear in her eyes said everything she couldn't. "Sarah," I said, my voice softening, "we don't need to forestall. We just must be careful." "Cautious," she repeated, letting out a sour giggle. "There's no such component as careful in a situation like this. It is best to depend of time before someone reveals out, and after they do, it's going to damage both folks." "You're not giving us a danger," I argued, my heart pounding. "We will discern this out together." She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "Arav, you're just a youngster. You do not understand what's at stake right here." Her phrases stung. However, I failed to go into reverse. "I'm now not a kid," I stated firmly. "You do not get to make that choice for me." The room fell silent, the tension among us crackling like a live twine. I ought to see the battle in her eyes, the struggle she turned into, waging with herself. She wanted to accept as true with me to present into the pull between us. However, the worry changed into prevailing, and I ought to sense her slipping away. "Please," I said, stepping nearer and taking her hands in mine. "Don't do this." Her solve faltered, and for a second she checked out me like I used to be the only component maintaining her afloat. But then, as quickly as it had seemed, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by means of a cold, steely dedication. "That is over," she said, pulling her fingers away, and that I need you to leave now." I stared at her, my chest tightening with a combination of anger and heartbreak. "You do not mean that arouse go," she said, her voice trembling. "Please." I hesitated, every a part of me screaming to live to fight for her. However, the look in her eyes informed me I might already lost without some other phrase. I grew to become and left the door, clicking close at the back of me. I did not go domestic that night. Rather, I wandered the empty streets, my thoughts racing. I could not let it stop like this. I wouldn't. Sarah changed into scared, however, she failed to suggest what she'd said. I used to be certain of it. She wanted me just as much as I wished her. I made up my mind to see her once more, to restore things, to prove that we may want to make this work. Day after today, the whole lot fell apart. I went to her study room after school, much like continually. However, when I were given there, the door changed into locked, the lighting off. My chest tightened with a pang of tension. I pulled out my smartphone and texted her, "In which are you? We want to talk." No response. I tried calling, however, it went instantly to voicemail. Panic commenced to creep in my thoughts, conjuring worst-case scenarios. Had someone determined out had she been fired? The thought made my belly churn, but then, as I used to be approximately to leave, I noticed her. She changed into walking in the direction of the parking zone, her bag slung over her shoulder. Alleviation washed over me, and I hurried after her. "Sarah," I known as out my voice echoing inside the empty lot. She iced over, turning to stand me. The appearance on her face stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just worry, it became terror. "Arouse," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You can't be here. I had to see you," I said, stepping closer. "We want to talk." "There is nothing to speak about," she stated, glancing round nervously. "That is over. I informed you, which you don't suggest it," I stated, my voice shaking. "You are just scared." "Of course I'm scared," she snapped, her voice breaking. "Do you have got any concept what this can do to me? To you?" "Then let's determine it out," I pleaded together. "We are able to prevent." She interrupted, her eyes blazing. "You don't understand, Arav. This isn't just about us. If anyone unearths out," she trailed off, her voice trembling with barely suppressed panic, "then nobody will discover," I stated, my desperation mounting. "We will be cautious." I promise. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's too overdue for that," she whispered. Before I may want to reply, the sound of footsteps echoed in the back of me. I became to look some other teacher, Mr. Richards, walking in the direction of us. His expression became considered one of suspicion and confusion. "Sarah," he said, searching among us, "is the entirety okay right here?" She hesitated, her gaze darting to me, after which, lower back to him. "Sure," she stated. Speedy Arav became simply leaving. I opened my mouth to protest, but she shot me a caution appearance that stopped me bloodless proper. I muttered, stepping again. "I'll see you later." Mr. Richards watched me go, his eyes narrowing, as if he sensed something wasn't proper. My coronary heart pounded as I walked away, the load of the instant crushing me that night, time I couldn't sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her fear, her desperation. She becomes slipping far from me, and I failed to recognize a way to forestall it. The fallout become quick and brutal, the rumors unfold like wildfire, and it wasn't long earlier than the truth got here out. Sarah become fired, her career in ruins. As for me, I used to be left to pick up the portions of a life that could never be the equal. However, even now, after the whole thing, I cannot deliver myself to regret it, because for a quick second we had something that felt real, something that confounded the regulations, the consequences, and the chaos it left in its wake. Sarah's face became etched into my thoughts as the aftermath opened up. The instant Mr. Richards stormed into the room, her trembling fingers had reached out as if to shield me. She had tried to talk to deflect blame, however her voice faltered beneath the burden of his fury. My chest tightened as I found out what she became approximately to do, take the fall to guard me. Arav became simply leaving. She stammered, her voice wavering. There's not anything occurring here. However, her phrases rang whole, the tension among us as clear as day. Mr. Richards' gaze darted among us, his disbelief deepening with every passing second. Shop it. He snapped his voice sharp. I'm taking this to the principal. Both of you come with me. My coronary heart pounded as we were marched down the empty hallway, Sarah on foot stiffly beside me, her eyes constant on the floor. I desired to mention something to ease her fear. However, the phrases would not come for the first time for the reason that this all started. The truth of what we'd accomplished hit me like a tidal wave. The following day, Sarah turned into gone. The whispers commenced before the first bell even rang. By way of lunch, the complete college was buzzing with rumors, wild, exaggerated stories of what had occurred among us. Some painted Sarah as a predator, others as a sad determined, caught in a scandal. She couldn't break out. No one knew the truth, however, that did not stop them from speculating. As for me, I used to be left to stand the hurricane by myself. My dad and mom were furious, my pals burdened. The college administration didn't expel me, however, they made it clear that I was on thin ice. Everywhere I went, I felt the load of judgmental stares and hushed conversations. But the worst element became not knowing wherein Sarah had gone. She hadn't reached out, hadn't tried to give an explanation for or say goodbye. It became as though she had vanished, leaving at the back of not anything, however, the wreckage of what we'd shared. Weeks became months, and the scandal began to fade from the college's collective reminiscence. But for me, the ache lingered. I replayed our moments together again and again, looking to make feel of the way something so extreme, so ingesting had ended so. After which, sooner or later, I saw her. I was taking walks through town, my arms filled into my jacket pockets against the biting iciness wind. It turned into late afternoon, the streets quiet except for the occasional car passing by way of. I became a nook, and there she was standing outdoor, a coffee shop. She regarded specific, her once vibrant eyes dulled, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. She didn't see me at the start, but whilst our eyes met, she froze. "Arav," she said softly, her voice filled with a combination of wonder and regret. "Sarah," I replied. My heart, racing the two, didn't suppose I would see you again. She hesitated, glancing around as if anticipating a person to appear and drag her away. "I should not be here," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not safe for either folks." "Safe," I repeated, stressed. "What are you speaking about?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I made a mistake. Arav, I let things cross to some distance, and now I am paying the charge we each are. You failed to make a mistake," I said, firmly stepping closer. "We just cared about every other. That's no longer incorrect." Her expression softened, but the unhappiness in her eyes remained. "Maybe not. However, the global doesn't see it that manner." "Then forget about the world," I stated, desperation creeping into my voice. "We will still discern this out together." She looked at me for a long second, her feelings warring on her face. "Arav," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I cannot preserve jogging. I can't keep pretending. This will work. It's over." "No," I stated, shaking my head. "It's no longer. I won't permit it be, but—" She turned into already stepping returned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You have to allow me pass," she stated, "for your sake, for mine." And with that she grew to become and walked away, leaving me status in the cold with not anything but the ghost of her touch, and the ache of what could have been years later. I nevertheless consider her. I graduated, moved away, and commenced a brand new life. But irrespective of how a whole lot time passes, I cannot neglect her. The manner she made me experience, the manner we burned so brightly, and so in short. Every so often I wonder where she is, if she's glad, if she's observed peace, and on occasion past due at night, I dream of her, of the way her lips felt in opposition to mine, the manner her eyes lit up while she smiled, and in those desires for only a moment it feels like we're together once more, unfastened from the sector's judgment. However, when I wake up, the reality units in. Our tale was in no way meant to have a glad finishing. It changed into a flame that burned too fiercely, consuming the entirety in its direction. And though it's over, it will constantly be a part of me, a bittersweet reminiscence of a love that might by no means be